It's not we go in, we clock out, and then we go home.
No.
This is all day, every day for us. These are our children's lives, their futures, our grandchildren. So
That's right.
It's very, very important.
It's personal. You two have such personal stories, but all of us that are in this field have we have some who that's behind the work we do, and that drive us to keep doing this work because it's really, really important. And I always just think about that kindergartner who comes to school expecting to learn to read and write. It's like what we do, Welcome, everyone, to the Literacy Keys. I am your host today, Tracy Young. I'm a certified Orton Gillingham tutor and mom to a dyslexic daughter. And I have two very special guests that I am excited to have here today. So without further ado, we are going to get started. Well, welcome, everyone. Hello.
Hi, guys. We're so delighted to be here, Tracy.
Absolutely. I think that I am really excited when this opportunity came up because you're both with the 95% group. And there's a lot of things that they are doing, or you are doing, I should say, really to improve literacy and particularly amongst teenagers. And teenagers are near and dear to my heart for multiple reasons, partly because I specialize in them, and also because my daughter was a teenager. She was in high school when we found out that a neuropsychologist diagnosed that she was dyslexic. I'm like, oh, that explains a lot. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Laura. I'll turn it to you, and please introduce yourself. You will do a much better job at it than I could ever.
Oh, thanks, Tracy. And I, again, just so delighted to be here. So I'm the Chief Academic Officer at 95% Group, and we are a leading publisher of educational resources. And we have a lovely suite of resources for our adolescent readers. And we also provide professional learning. And, we believe in our organization that, parents are a child's first and best teacher. And we also, support homeschool parents through a wonderful partner called All About Learning Press. And we also, through our resources, provide a lot of parent connections because we also want to make sure that parents, know what's going on in the classroom. So we provide parent resources for teachers to use with parents to keep them informed. And although Brett is not officially part of 95% Group, I've gotten to know Brett over the years, and he's part of our Education Leadership Council, which is an esteemed group of educational leaders from really around the country in different organizations. And I'm so just privileged to know her and to help elevate her work. And I'll let her tell you about that.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you so much for having me on as well. When Laura invited me, I thought, what a great opportunity. So I have a similar background as you, Tracy. I have a dyslexic daughter. We found out a little bit earlier. But the beautiful thing that interested me in speaking with you so much is the focus on the adolescent, the older kids, because I think once you see what the good reading instruction does and how it helps kids, we have a special obligation to go back in for the older kids that we failed. And so I think lifting up the ways that we can help these older kids is really, really important.
And so often teachers don't realize how to do it. Like a lot of the things that are in place are there for elementary school. But what happens when they go into middle school and beyond and so forth? And Brett, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, I was so interested in in your background. I just wanted to share that I'm the founder and president of Parents for Reading Justice. And I don't know if I would have changed it if I could go back. I did not get my OG certification. I decided that I would go in kind of the advocacy route. And so I got my daughter the help that she needed. And then I went back to get all the babies in the school. So we grassroots organized a parent group, flipped our district to the science of reading, did something similar at the state level, brought science of reading to the state. And now we're doing this work nationally in really lifting up the parent voice in the whole literacy universe. They are a missing voice, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I can see where the similarities are in our backgrounds because, in fact, I did do a little bit of advocacy training and so forth, and then discovered had an opportunity to become Alta certified or to follow the Orton Gillingham approach and so forth. So I started it, quickly realized that I'd rather teach than fight. But I'm very thankful for the knowledge that I have because the two are linked. Because it's also, for example, the information that you discovered, right, with your advocacy, that you were able to change your district and state and so forth.
Well, and we can motivate districts, motivate states to move to the science. But that's what I always say to Laura, and I would say to you, then someone has to know how to teach the babies. So we appreciate the work that you guys are doing immensely. So we are a very good team.
I
Right.
agree. And I was just going to say, I admire so much the work that both of you have done. And I kind of marvel at the path that you have both taken, the advocacy path, the teaching path, and then we are the resource provider path. And I have to say, I started out as a middle school teacher, of
Mm.
course, many, many years ago. But, as a middle school teacher, I had students who struggled to read, and I was dumbfounded because I thought, well, I would totally expected them to come to middle school able to read. My expertise was in ELA, and I was an English teacher, and expected them to be able to read the text that that was my content area. And so I had no clue what to do. And still today, that is true. And,
Mhm.
I've done a lot of professional learning, with teachers. And for many years, I focused on primary grade, how do we build those foundational skills with primary grade students? And so the audiences that I've served most of my career have been teachers of primary students. And only, recently now am I seeing more and more teachers of middle grade student, intermediate, middle grade, and even high school students. And the teachers are saying, we need help. We need to understand what to do. Yes, I wish that I could just focus on my content area. I wish that were all I needed to do. But frankly, I need to know what to do. And that's why we say, everyone's a reading teacher. And help me, I need to understand. And so whatever path we're taking, we're all on the same page here. How are we helping our students? How are we helping our adolescents?
Absolutely. Could you go into a little bit, like what are some of the needs that you see adolescents have?
Sure. I'll start, and then Brett, I know you can chime in on this too. So, what I see over and over again, and what I hear over and over again from the teachers that I work with, is that the adolescents are experiencing, what they're experiencing actually trace back to foundational skills. And oftentimes I'll go into a school, and the teachers will say, "Our kids can't comprehend the text." And it really isn't a comprehension problem. It's kind of like, let's go deeper. Let's go below the surface of the iceberg. And what's below the surface of the iceberg? It's the foundational skills that were never fully developed. Now, I want to be really clear that foundational skills, by that I don't just mean phonemic awareness and phonics. I also mean vocabulary and ultimately language. What we're seeing more and more are adolescents who really have language deficits. And by language, I mean vocabulary, but I also mean language structures. We really expect and want our students to be able to read complex text, which is, the complex language structures, and write in those same structures. But if they don't have the oral language in those same structures, and that starts with their oracy or their own oral language, it's impossible for them to keep the comprehension within a complex syntax in reading, and then to develop that in writing. And so foundational skills really starts with oral language. And then, of course, I also mean, basic monosyllabic decoding because, they can't encounter that complex multisyllabic decoding and know what to do with those big words. And oftentimes I'll say to a fourth, fifth grade teacher, what do your students do when they come across a big word? And they're like, they skip it, or they look at the first few letters, take a guess, and they don't know what to do with the multisyllabic word. They're intimidated by it. So we have to build on monosyllabic decoding and then give them specific strategies with multisyllabic decoding. So I would also say, really, it all starts with our ability to assess and diagnose, right? Like we have to be able to understand what are the root issues. So again, foundational issues, I think, are the main problems. And then our ability to assess and diagnose those, early identification is really critical. The wait and see approach does not work.
Yes, all three of us are shaking our heads because we have been in environments and have heard, oh, we'll just wait and see. And you're just sitting there like, no, do you realize this child can't wait and see?
No. And I'm going to say one more thing, because I think this is really important. We have so many adolescent readers who have experienced failure over and over and over, and that erodes their cognitive bandwidth to be able to be successful. Because when you have had that repeated failure, your ability to persevere at something that is challenging, it just erodes. And so we've got to give them early success, incremental steps of success to be able to succeed. So Brett, what do you want to add to that? I know you've got ideas on that too.
Well, and I know enough to be dangerous about the specifics, like academic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, reading, language, writing. But what I would say is if you have a student that you're not finding till a little bit later, or who is still struggling in junior high and high school, really, I would say the first thing you're going to have to do is to build trust with that child, because they have been, as you said, I heard someone talking about you can get over a trauma if it's like one thing, bang, and then you move on. But when you are traumatized every day, all day long, for 12 or 13 years, over and over, the cortisol, and then you are shamed and blamed for it. You're not trying hard enough. Your parents didn't read to you enough. You're not paying attention. You're not going to recess. That is so horrible. It's not just one trauma. It's constant, chronic, and it's exacerbated by those people that you're being told to look up to, telling you it's your fault. So you kind of have to build trust. And Kareem and I do a podcast together, and it's really interesting. He taught in Oakland, and he had students who nobody else wanted, and he would tell them, and he got them to believe this, that I will help you, and you've got to trust me, but like this one last time, just trust, because everybody says that. Try this one last time. And when they begin to see success, when they begin to learn to read, then you have bonded with them, and you got to come through for them. But if you come through for them, you have saved their life and the life of their family. So it is, I think of OGs or anyone who's really an instructional expert, I call them like reading angels, because you are, oh my God, there's nothing more important than a teacher who can really teach a kid to read.
Nothing more important. And it's not, you know what? It's not hyperbole to say you've saved a life. That's not hyperbole. Yeah. I just finished a webinar with Amir Baraka, and he contributed to this. I was sharing with Tracy that, this book, Science of Reading 3.0, which Brett wrote a lovely piece in this book around parents as advocates. And Amir Baraka wrote a lovely piece, and it's called Reading as Freedom. And his story, he wrote a book called Undiagnosed: The Ugly Side of Dyslexia. And his story is heart-wrenching. And, he talks about he was not only called stupid, because he wasn't a reader, and there was no label. He wasn't diagnosed as having dyslexia, but he was beaten. And so talk about repeated, sense of failure. And his story is one of, he could have been, he was, his story. I don't want to give away too much if people want to watch the webinar or read his book, or even just read his story in this book. But it's not hyperbole to say that he tells a story of a child who was really, his life was completely altered by not being a reader, and then completely saved when he became, as a young man, when he learned to read.
Absolutely.
In my parent group, we had 3 mothers who started a parent group, and it was small at first, grew a little bit. But just in that small group, we had one older child commit suicide because everybody was graduating from college, moving on with their life. And he was never diagnosed. This was before we did our work. And then my very good friend's son, he overdosed in his home on Thanksgiving with his whole family. And they think that much of it was how he was made to feel. So I don't, like you say, I'm not just throwing that around. A lot of people think, it's a different thing. All of us have had personal experience. So it's not a day job. It's not we go in, we clock out, and then we go home.
No.
This is all day, every day for us. These are our children's lives, their futures, our grandchildren. So it's very, very important.
And it's personal. I think most of us, you two have such personal stories, but all of us that are in this field we have some who that's behind the work we do, and that drive us to keep doing this work, because it's really, really important. And I always just think about that kindergartner who comes to school expecting to learn to read and write. It's like what we do, and it is the most fundamental thing. Learning to read is the most fundamental thing that leads to the success in school and leads to success out of school. It's the most fundamental thing that we promise our students that we're going to deliver on for them. And when that doesn't happen, and we have to take more extraordinary measures to make sure it happens, we have to deliver on that. We have to.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things as you were talking kind of came to my mind is that when my kids were in school, I was one of those very involved parents. I was in the classroom once a week, volunteering, and I remember working with one student. So he's in kindergarten, and he was having a lot of difficulty with the letters and everything else. Now, knowing what I know, to me, it's really apparent what the issue was. But when I didn't show him the letters, when it was simply oral communication, he got it. But none of us knew or anything else. And it is personal. We put names to the kids. None of us think, none of us grow up saying, oh, I'm going to be, an OG tutor or an advocate or, write a book or something like that. No, the path, you fall upon the path because it's personal.
It's a good question. Do you think that you need to have a personal experience to? I'm always baffled by why people, teachers, professors don't just shift. Is it that they need some type of personal experience, or why is it so hard? Like, I literally am advocating, I'll put something on social media and they come out of the woodwork. These people that genuinely believe that 3 killing works.
Right. Now, so I have a theory because I'm always overanalyzing and thinking about it. And it was actually something in the Science of Reading Facebook group was posted by a teacher. And what it was is a comment to the effect of the potential or the possible damage that a teacher did by not knowing the information. And I think that you go into teaching because you want to help. It is a calling. And if at any point thinking that you might not have been doing something or taking it further that could have caused harm, that's pretty powerful. So sometimes the reaction, that butting up that we get is an inability at that moment to accept the possible damage instead of, what, we are all human. We don't know what we don't know. And hindsight is 2020. We just need to move forward. Instead of thinking coulda, shoulda, woulda, maybe let's make change forward, moving forward, and touch other kids.
The thing I have begun doing is looking upstream. So I think that parents and children are losing out because their kids aren't learning to read. And it is the basis of all other learning. But I think teachers spend time and money going to college and they are set up for failure. And both of those result from the colleges of education. So that's where I have less patience. And in fact, I think that's the one entity that should keep up with the science. And we have some success in Ohio with that.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah, definitely jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do think there's a couple other things that probably should be brought up in this discussion too. And that's one of, there's people have a professional reputation that rests on their professional work. And they're not always eager to say, oh, my professional work, I need to change because they've rested their reputation on this idea, right? However, I believe that one of the beauties of our profession, and what I say about when I talk about our profession, what I mean is the profession I chose to go into, which is education. And that education spans all the way from a preschool teacher to a university professor and every other iteration, including where I am now, is we should always be infused with curiosity and with inquiry. And, it's just like any other profession. We should always be striving toward what do we know now that we didn't know then? I came up as a whole language teacher. Like that's all I knew. But if I hadn't been curious enough and willing to be humble, then what would I be doing? I'd still be, teaching kids in the, very, very flawed way that I was taught to teach kids. And that's just wrong. And people have to say, okay, my professional reputation rests on this, but yeah, gosh, I didn't get this right. Now I know this. And so I think this whole, I'm not defending the professional reputation, but I think that's a factor that people need to get over and be humble.
We are continuous learners and we just need to be in any field, right? Just because there are constantly new developments that are happening and so forth. So let me ask this. I always love to leave a very positive message for parents and so forth, because of course there are definitely things that we can improve on and so forth. But hope is important because a lot can be accomplished. So what would you say to parents?
Brett, you go, because I know you talk to parents all the time.
I do. That's my jam. I think that it is very beneficial, even if your district is getting it right, to form a parent group and to professionalize yourself, kind of run it like a business and get involved. Get involved with your school, get involved with your school board members, your leadership, and really begin to look at what is being taught, how it's being taught, priorities. I think we all kind of came up like our parents, thinking you just put you take your kid to the public school, drop them off, you do your thing, and they come home and they learn to read. But It is not that way, and it can be very rewarding. So I started out as like the cupcake mom, like you said. I was the room mom. I'm into cupcakes. Everybody loved me. And then I kind of got sideways because I was asking too many questions. But then when the district saw the light and came to the science of reading, now I work with them shoulder to shoulder, very professionally. I actually go to more conferences than they do. I bring new ideas to them. Oral language is now what we're going to be looking at, and
Yes.
DLD and all these things. So I actually think that parents are a huge value
That's that.
to the district
Yes.
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
the country.
All right, before I turn it over to Laura, so how can our listeners find you, Brett?
We are all over social media, but we're at parentsforreadingjustice.org, and we are hosting a free virtual conference for parents, educators, anybody in the community that's interested in kids learning to read on August 2nd. I can send you a little something if you'd like.
Yes, please. And I will include it in the show notes. That would be absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, and then that's going to kick off a professional learning community quarterly for parents. We're going to bring all the national experts, researchers, amazing advocates to come in and talk to parents. And then we're going to run some parents through our master class to do the similar things that we have done to try to start little fires all over the country so that everybody will get science reading and learn to read.
Perfect. Thank you. Definitely send that to me. And Laura, then your message and where can we find you?
Sure. Well, obviously you can find me at L Stewart at 95percentgroup.com, but also you can, check out 95% Group. And also I'll give you a link to this book, Science of Reading 3.0. And you can read, as Brett said, some of the new frontiers in the science of reading, things like oral language. There's a lot of content in this piece, including Brett's piece, including, I mentioned Amir Baraka, and, his piece is very compelling around dyslexia. And so I guess the one thing I would say to parents, especially if you have a child with dyslexia, is to always remember that your child is abundant with gifts to the world. And, they might have this challenge, but make sure your kid knows that they're abundant with gifts to the world, and, share with your child, people who are thriving with dyslexia, and make sure that your child knows that they're not a failure, that it's a neurological thing. And I know that Amir emphasizes that, that once he knew that it was a neurological issue, that it was so free. It was so freeing for him, and I know that's probably true with your children as well. And imagine if somebody says to you, you're not broken. Your brain just works differently, and we can work with that. I think that's a really important message to share with our students. So that would be my message of hope for our parents to understand as well.
Thank you. That is absolutely beautiful. Yeah. And I am sure there are parents out there listening right now that need that message. So I am going to thank you both for coming on, being guests, and we'll have to do it again. I will absolutely link or provide all the information in the show notes so our listeners can find the information, can find both of you. And that's it. I'm going to thank you from the bottom of my heart for talking about teenagers, and really any age, but teenagers are special to me for that. So thank you very, very much. And for our listeners, I will see you next week. Bye now.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.